Welcome to Foragers Feedback. It is the 29th of May. I can't believe that May has run through so quickly, but it has, hasn't it? It seemed that not that long ago it was quite cold, and now we've got the warmer weather coming through. Although in Scotland we were getting quite a bit of rain, and luckily we have had a couple of days of sunshine, which has been really pleasant. Being able to enjoy that, dip my toes into the ocean. As I just said, I'm on the island of Seil, and so we went over to Easdale, which is an island that has no cars on it, so you have to have a wheelbarrow to take you from the harbour to the place that you're staying, if you choose to stay there, because I believe that a number of people do that, and there are people who live there all year round on Easdale. But if you would like to see my images or the footage that I did of the old quarries that are now filled with water on Easdale, do go over to YouTube, where you'll be able to see them. Since last week, Bumble and I travelled to the Trossachs, and the Trossach pier is on Lake Katrine, and there are a couple of boats there. You have a steamship called Sir Walter Scott, and we were able to book a cruise on the Sir Walter Scott, and it takes you along the lazy S shape of Loch Katrine up to the top and back again. There is an option, if you wish to, where you can take a bicycle up to the top on the ferry or on the cruise and cycle back, which follows, there's a road that follows the edge of the loch on that side, which I would imagine is quite a pleasant way to travel if it's dry. One of the other boats they have there is called the Rob Roy, and that does a shorter trip of about an hour if you wanted to do that. And you think, what's that got to do with Foragers Feedback? Well, one of the things that you'll get to see is the wildlife that thinks that it's got a bit of privacy, and then along comes chugging the boat. But we saw an osprey flying over the loch and various ducks. There weren't as many geese there as I thought there might be, and I don't know if that's to do with the depth of the water. But we also passed what they call Ellen's Island, which Sir Walter Scott wrote about, and he wrote The Lady of the Lake based in that area. There is a lot of birch on the area, and you'll notice that by the water's edge the bark is quite silver from the silver birch. Higher levels there do seem to be a number of pines, and that will then dictate the type of animals that might live in the area. They do say the deer sometimes come down to the water's edge, but we didn't actually see any deer in that particular area. I haven't seen a red squirrel yet, although I have seen plenty of signs that let you know you are in an area where there are red squirrels. There have been a number of crows and a raven, which came and took some bird seed that I put out as part of my offering on my trip. We enjoyed our trip on the cruise on the Sir Walter Scott, and you could see quite how dark and deep the water was. They said it was about 150 metres deep at the point that we were going over, and apparently there's a type of fish that's an Arctic fish that only likes to live in those colder depths, and it's actually left over from quite prehistoric times before the glaciers shifted. As you might guess, there's a significant amount of water on our travels, whether it's in the form of lochs or the rivers winding to the lochs, and the streams falling effervescently down the mountain slopes. The water has been mostly clear, and I've seen darting shadows flit in the sunlight. The Trossachs slopes covered by predominantly birch trees, although in the waterfall area they were watched over by ancient alders. I started to look at the wayside to understand what was growing well here in May 2026. I saw carpets of bluebells colouring the higher slopes and sprinkling between the gaps of the trees. Plenty of fern and young heather spikes dropping the dreaded ticks onto lower legs and pets. Luckily, I have found I had some rose geranium essential oil, which I was able to make up a deterrent spray for Bumble and myself, because there were plenty of them in the Trossachs, unfortunately. We then meandered towards Cauldron, following the lock roads, and we could see plenty of people staying in the car parks overnight, and you could see people having fires by the lakeside, and it was a point. Please do pick up your litter when you are having your picnic by the lockside. One of the reasons I believe that happens is because there's shallow water edges, which is perfect for families to stay there. We did manage to pull into one of the car parks close to closing time, because then there were more spaces there, and we found a number of ducks entertaining the children, and unfortunately a good degree of litter, even though there was a bin there for people to put their rubbish away. And I had noticed that on places where there's a large level of people visiting, there's generally been a good selection of bins, and they tend to have either metal or heavier ones to cope with the wind. So my advice is if you're visiting those places, please use the bins and don't leave your rubbish behind you. We have done a couple of litter picks, and we also did a litter pick when we were walking back along the road that follows Lake Katrine. And unfortunately, I even found somebody had left behind their plastic milk bottle, and there were plenty of plastic bags of dog poo, which was not what I expected to find on the wayside at all. Our destination was, in the long run, Oban, but we decided to do this at a slow pace, or I should say I decided to do this. Bumble's coming along for the ride and just wants me to stop on a regular basis so he can go and investigate the waterside. And luckily there are plenty of opportunities to do that, where you can pull over and have a look. We found lots of willow and rowan by the riverside, and I started to note that there was also a significant amount of plantain growing in abundance where there were midges. And when you look at the properties of plantain, you will find it's anti-inflammatory. It makes a great salve for cuts and bites. Irene Soper wrote that plantain was preferred to burdock by the Romany for treating nettle stings because of its increased antihistamine action. And I have found plenty of it, especially in Anfiannoch Forest. There was a good amount there, but you do have to be mindful of selecting your leaves maybe away from where dogs might be weeing on the grass. Here in Seil, there's also a good crop of coltsfoot, which can be used as a poultice, and that works as an anti-inflammatory on wounds as well. I found some references to using coltsfoot as a tea, and you can also smoke coltsfoot if you don't have any mullein or marshmallow. Coltsfoot is in the herbal books as a means of managing problems with the lungs. And it's interesting when you look at the leaf, the back side of it is quite furry, and there's a certain density to the leaf that would say that it holds a bit of fluid in there, and that means it's got the mucilaginous properties that you would find in the marshmallow plant and mullein as well. So keep an eye out for those if you're travelling in this area. Coltfoot's quite interesting because although it says it's in the shape of a horse's foot, it's got points, and I found between 7, 9 and 11 points on a coltfoot leaf. They're a medium green colour, and you can see the lines going up to those points, and as I say, the back has like a downy feeling. It's furry, a little bit like stroking a rabbit, if you can imagine. I did find what I consider to be a forager's dream was a pond full of tadpoles, and they are a great indicator of a healthy location. Because the sun was shining, all of these tadpoles were swimming towards a section of rock in the pool where there was algae, and they were all coming along and feeding it, and it looked like there were hundreds of them coming through from another point of the pond, and then they were circulating through, and they were navigating each other's space in a beautiful way. Occasionally there was the odd bump, and I have videoed that, and it will be put onto YouTube when I've got access to a decent data upload. So if you'd like to watch the tadpoles I found in the pond, then do go there and have a look. Here, amongst the long grass, there's foxglove's purple spikes, gorse yellow blooms, and more plantain, and I've gathered some of this to macerate in oil. On the Oban Road, I stopped at a garden centre, and I asked one of the gardeners there what he would recommend to keep the midges at bay, and he suggested lemon balm. So I bought a lemon balm, and it's growing quite well, but it does seem to like to have a regular water rather than my piece of rosemary that I've got growing, which likes to dry out in between. So I have to keep an eye on that. But it has done its job so far. It's kept the midges out of the van, which is wonderful. As I said before, I will be uploading videos onto YouTube to show you the visuals of what I've been seeing so far on my trip in Scotland. We're moving our way, we're going over to Mull, and we'll be staying over there for a couple of days and then moving north. So if you've got any questions or any suggestions of any places that you think you should go and visit, do let us know. And the other thing that I wanted to mention was I am looking for a basket weaving course, if anybody's got any recommendations for one of those whilst I'm up here. I will also be uploading some of the images. I went on a wildlife trip called Corribreckan, which takes you through the Slate Islands, and hopefully you'll enjoy some of those images too. It was an amazing trip. It's done by an Easdale company called Seafari. That's SEAFARI, and they're based here in the harbour area, and they have regular trips. They do recommend that you book ahead. I got lucky because there was a space available on the 3-hour trip, and I was also really lucky because they looked after Bumble for me whilst I went. So he had a wonderful afternoon in the shop meeting lots of people, which made him very happy. But I would highly recommend doing one of those trips. One of the trips that does seem to get sold out quite quickly is they do a day trip to Iona, and that seemed to be really popular, and people can then travel through the Slate Islands towards Mull and Iona. So do look out for Safari based in Easdale. You've got Easdale Community as well, which does have a number of events. And if you're in the area, I would highly recommend it as a visit place. Thank you for listening to the Cauldron of Curiosities. If you have any questions or comments that you would like to direct straight to me, then do email info@thedandelion.moon.co.uk.